The main topic of both Parshios Tazria and Metzora is the phenomena of a person, on one's clothing, or on one's house, that gets some type of discoloration as described specifically in the Torah, and the kohen has to pronounce this to be tzara'at, which we translate as leprosy, even though, as we'll see, has nothing to do with what we would call a medical diagnosis. So the Chumash tells us if a person has the middle of Parshat Beis, his flesh, a sa'is, or a sapachat, or a baharas, and will become a tzara'at, affliction, on the skin of his flesh, he shall be brought to Aaron the kohen, or to one of his sons the kohanim. The kohen shall look at the affliction on the skin of his flesh, and if the hair on the affliction has changed to white, and the affliction's appearance is deeper than the skin of the flesh, it's tzara'at, affliction, and the kohen shall look at it and declare him contaminated. And as source 2 points out, only the kohen is authorized by the Torah to diagnose a tzara'at and to announce that tamei, person is impure, or tahor, person is pure. This could only be done by a kohen, only done by a priest. The question that I'd like to try to understand today, and this is the question that's raised in a lot of the Sfarim, source 3, Gam sarich lavin, lama lo histapka Torah b'chacham mumche b'inyanei tumah v'tara. Why can't you take anyone who's an expert on tumah and tara and allow them to be koveya, allow them to decide whether it's tzara'at or not? Why is it that the Torah is makbi that it should specifically be a kohen? Umad dafka lekohen bebeit hanagoyim. What are the kohanim doing in this arena? The kohen's job is lahoros, to teach the people. The kohen's job is the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. But what is a kohen doing in this whole area of tumah and tahara? That's a question, one question that I'd like to deal with today. A secondary question, which is a much more technical question, is when the pasuk says he shall be brought to Aaron the kohen, to one of his sons the kohanim, and the Torah is eternal. Well, Aaron only lived for a certain amount of time. Why is there this distinction of Aaron the kohen or one of his sons the kohanim? That's a secondary question that we'll touch on as well. As we noted, clearly tzara'at is not a physical disease, but rather, Hanagoyim says, Abina Vabrocha, source 4, Einam choli haguf, elaba'im ketotza'a mecholi hanefesh. When a person would get tzara'at, it is a sign that there's a malady within the person spiritually. And that's why our rabbis tell us for Zayin Averos, for 7 different major sins, probably the most pronounced of which are Lashon Hara, of Sarasayin, of Gasad Ruach, of idle speech, gossip, of haughtiness, and narrowness of eye, right? A person stingy, that tzara'at comes. And therefore, you don't need to go to doctors, because it's not a physical disease. You don't go through a physical avenue. But rather, you go to a spiritual source. And what was the symbol of the spiritual source then? Were the kohanim, were the priests. And he continues by saying, when a person has something physically wrong with them, so you feel the pain, you have a pain in your tooth, a pain in your hand, so you go to a doctor. It's much more difficult when a person has a spiritual ailment to be able to recognize this and to be able to take care of this. And that's why the Chumash says, V'huva el ha-kohen. Even if it's against his will, even if it's by others. If something is wrong in a person, it's very hard for a person to admit that there's something wrong with them spiritually. V'huva kohen, you have to bring them to the kohen. Lo tamod al damarecha, you can't stand passively by. And this person needs to get help. And the kohen becomes that spiritual mentor who will help this person. Along these lines, Rav Gamliel Rabinowitz in Tivat Torah just adds that the Targum Onkelos on the pasuk is describing the Metzora as Sagira, one who is an Adam Sagur, literally closed in. And he says the reason for this is because very often A person who has a spiritual illness refuses to listen to other people. Umachshiv atzmo chacham mikol adam in the arrow in 5. They believe that they know all the answers. They believe they can take care of themselves. And that's a semel of an adam shehu bilti tahor. This is really the quintessential sign of an impure person, a person who thinks that they know everything. This haughtiness, this arrogance, this misplaced arrogance, this feeling of, one is the best, that is real tuma at its height. And therefore, the way to respond to this is v'huva kohen. You have to bring him to the kohen. You have to allow him to be mevatel himself b'fnei tzadikim. You have to allow this person to recognize that you need to ask advice, whether from one's parents, whether from a rabbeim, from one's teachers. That a person has to realize that in life we don't all have all the answers, and we need to get advice, and we need to hear from outside people.